Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Learnathon, patented trademark and pending. We set this up kind of in the hopes to kind of um, relieve some of the obscurity around AI and some of the misconceptions around people working within AI. Hopefully relieve some people's anxieties and things like that. We coined it Learnathon because we were originally going to do a hackathon, but we wanted to remove that kind of competitive anxiety-inducing environment that hackathons can inspire in people sometimes. And we want to create like a series of challenges and things like that to really, guide you through, walk you through, make sure you feel supported, to kind of relieve some of the various anxieties that come through with any kind of new development and things that are sweeping the world quite rapidly. So we set this up and we really hope you enjoy it. We will be accepting any kind of feedback that you have. This is here for you fine folks. So we want to make sure that is exemplified and you feel supported. In kind of that vein, we have several devs here that are familiar with the challenges and what we'll be going through. So if you have any kind of issues as we're going through, as said on this landing page, throw a hashtag, help hashtag in the chat. And you can either do hashtag help and then a description of what you need help with, or you just throw in the help. We'll have some people come in, they'll be reacting with little eyes, and that means they'll be contacting you shortly. And they'll either bring you into a breakout room or chat with you to make sure everything is resolved and okay. Yeah, and with that, I will hand it over to the lovely Della to start going through our challenges.
Thanks, Tom. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna start it off. I'm trying to think about the best way to start this off. I think I want to start it off because I have a captured audience with some of my thoughts and feelings, of course, first and foremost. And it'll give people time to come and join. And then we'll go into, as an itinerary, we'll go into sort of setup, making sure you can all get the setup from scratch. There's instructions, but we also have like backups in case anything goes wrong. So we'll get everyone working no matter what. And finally, we'll get to the point where we're all working together. We're all like doing stuff, and I'll just be working in the background, talking about some things as well, showing off some tools, and I'll be open to Q&A the whole time. So that's kind of like the overall picture of what will be going on. How long each of the segments take, well, who knows? We'll see. We'll play by ear. Yeah, so let me kind of start with myself first, an introduction. My name is Della Ali. People call me Della for short. I have been at Rangle for 12, 13 years. Some number that is so long I forget the exact rounding error. Let's say 10 plus. So yeah, I've been doing software development for a very long time, and I have been interested in AI for longer, actually, since I'm very, very young. Actually, it's great for me because it's this kind of like renaissance in AI is very much aligned with my personal interests. So I found a way to kind of combine things that are really interesting to me, very passionate to me, to the work, which I also find very interesting and passionate. So it's been very exciting for me. The nice thing about this is that I have a good amount of experience. I've been working with language models and the like in like small projects and stuff for over 2 years now, and I have been like exploring and experimenting and making things with them the entire time, and I've been keeping abreast of all the changes and getting to know what's going on, and I can kind of see things going forward in direction, but who knows, really, it's still very much early days. So that's what I want to start with that first. I want to start with kind of just talking about how I think there's a common, let's say, concern that happens with any kind of new technology when it comes out, where like you never know if it's worth spending time investing in. You're like, maybe it's gonna be like a passing fad. I won't do anything about it, and then eventually it kind of like gets past that hill. I was like, okay, well maybe it's not a fad anymore, but now it's too late for me to jump in. Now everyone's already been doing this for like years. They're experts. I'll be coming in as a junior. Why even bother? First and foremost is why I appreciate people coming out and doing this. That's kind of indicative of somebody wanting to, get past that feeling, if you even have that feeling. Maybe none of you feel that at all. But in the off chance that you do, don't worry about that. It really still is very much early days. Like we really, we're still figuring out what it means to design good applications using AI and modern AI. I'm talking about here like LLMs and other generative AI things like diffusion models and like voice to voice models and video models in the future and some other stuff too. I'll talk about actually. We just had an announcement today. I'll kind of go over just kind of highlight some ways I'd like to think about AI. But yeah, like it's still very much early days. So don't feel like it's too late. In fact, there's some benefit here. One thing I'll be kind of talking about is the tool that we'll be using, the library we'll be using for generating or running our LLMs is something called Vercel AI SDK, which really only matured like 4 months ago. And before that, everyone was using LangChain, and LangChain, I will not speak ill of it because I think it did a lot of wonderful things. It really was like the tip of the spear into this world, and they tried a lot of really interesting, wonderful things. But I feel like the risk in being the first through the door is often you feel all the pain, and we learn from those pains. I kind of feel like that happened a bit with AngularJS and React. AngularJS kind of explored all these concepts, creating a full framework with like dirty checking, etc. React came along and said that's great, but let's do the virtual DOM instead, and that worked great. Anyway, a bit of a tangent, but like the nature of the beast is that we're at a point right now where I think it's a great time to actually start learning and start using the tools as they're starting to mature, and you can start building things quickly. So what does that mean for us? So what my goal today is, and I'm kind of going back and forth on this, is I don't want to assume any particular knowledge. I don't want to assume that anyone here is particularly like very advanced or very far down the path. I want to kind of start from the very beginning and say like, let's kind of talk broad strokes. Let's give you guys a really good base, playground to try things out in. Let's kind of explore what those questions are that I would normally ask myself, and kind of tell you why I ask those questions, and give you guys an opportunity to I don't know, you just all of you can go and play with this, make your own thing, modify things, fork this repo, even eventually if you want to like make pull requests to this repo and we can update it. This might be a playground to use over and over again. Ideally, that'd be nice. So yeah, that's kind of like the feeling and the vibe that we have today. It's very fresh, no pressure, very easy. So with that in mind, I'm going to start first by talking about sort of, I think folks today will be LLMs. We'll talk about AI, and I'll go like, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, Cole's notes, really quickly what they are, why they're interesting, go into some really interesting new things that are happening as of today, and kind of, from there jump into setting up our repo and going from there. Tom has their hands up.
Yeah, and just like you reminded me, Della, just to bring it in, the object of this, it will be like open source, available to everybody. We will build on this, and these challenges will be accessible across the board. So if you have like teams and stuff that you were excited about, you engaged with this, you can send them to this, and they can go through the challenges themselves as well.
Exactly. So I made this as reproducible as possible. You can run everything locally if you need to. You can deploy this if you need to. It's yours. In fact, it's not really mine. I've just forked and modified some data that was available inside of a really fun API, the Pokemon API, and we'll be working with that. And so yeah, just feel free to hack, as it were. Okay, cool. So let me start with kind of talking about LLMs, and I'll share my screen. So I don't need to go into the nitty-gritty of what LLM is. I want to talk about why they're interesting for developers. So why they're very interesting for developers is that, there's this whole challenge that we've had as developers of always having to kind of navigate a very structured world. And it's a challenge and a blessing because, when things are all dependable and expected to come in a certain format and look a certain way and be a certain way, we can predict and we can test, we can navigate that world. But there's always times when we want things to be a little bit more fuzzy, a little bit more like ambiguous. We want to have deviation, we want to have like a dynamicism that doesn't really exist without intelligence, or something that kind of resembles intelligence at the very least. So without those pieces, we've been unable to do certain things. And I think now we have this opportunity to kind of combine these two worlds in a sense and build things that would normally require a human to do maybe one part of a pipeline of tasks that could be almost entirely automated. And then it's like, this piece cannot be automated. We can't make that happen without a human in there. Now suddenly that one piece can be passed through, and we can build completely new kinds of applications with that like gap build. I'll kind of talk about some of my thoughts on that in general, and I'll point some things out. But that's kind of the overall philosophy I have with this. And I kind of even share a bit what I mean in this with this regard. I welcome like thoughts and questions after I kind of get my spiel out. So share my desktop. Share. So first of all, some of you may have heard of Anthropic. No, no harm if you haven't. Anthropic is an interesting company. We probably mostly all heard of OpenAI and ChatGPT. Anthropic is made as a company that's kind of forked off of that, let's say. A lot of the older like the introductory staff of OpenAI kind of had like disagreements of how things should happen, and they're like, you know what, we'll go make our own company. It's nothing too like angry, and there's not too much butting heads, but they have different philosophies. And Anthropic has recently come out with higher quality models. The 3.5 Sonnet model is being kind of really communicated a lot to developers as probably one of the better, if not best, models to use to help us develop. I use it regularly inside of what's it called? Cursor. That's what it's called. Cursor, if you haven't heard about it, it's a fork off of Code, which is an IDE. And this fork allows, it's like all about integrating in LLMs to help you with your code writing. I'll show you that in the background when I work. You'll see it, and I'll answer questions about that too if you're curious. But I really recommend if you're kind of curious about how you can use LLMs to help you write code, look into Cursor. They have a free trial for like using all the cool stuff, and it actually has a lot of depth to how much you can customize it to. So great tool. I recommend it. I think I've gotten most people on my team to start using it, and it's just like fantastic. So they came up with a new model today. Literally, couldn't have predicted it. No one knows in advance, really. Well, some people do. I didn't know in advance. Yeah, like the update here is very small, but I want to talk about this because there's a couple of things here that I think are very useful for anybody who wants to start to like understand these models a bit more. The philosophy behind them, how you can use them, and also I want to show you one of the newest things that they kind of introduced, which is computer use, to really push on this point that we can now start doing things that we could not have done before, completely new things. Okay, so Claude 3.5 Sonnet, there's different versions. There's Haiku Sonnet and Opus. I won't go through all of them, whatever. That's just kind of different sizes. Sonnet is the one that everyone likes to use. It's fast and it's good. They just kind of upgraded it. So they didn't make a 3.6 or 3.7. This is some annoying thing that happens. There are these big point jumps, and they're kind of like, mysterious as to what's going on behind the scenes for these big point jumps. Going from 2 or 3 or 3 to 4, who knows what the difference is? Going from 3 to 3.5, even more ambiguous, but there is a difference. And sometimes they'll just say 3.5 gets updated over and over and over again. So it's like 3.5 with hidden V1, V2, V3, V4 in the end. This is like 3.5 V2. So you'll see over here benchmarks. So this is one, I'm going to go over this real quick. I'm not going to talk about them too much, but it's very good to know about this when you're looking at different models. And they kind of show you different models over here. They show you the Gemini Flash models, which we'll be using actually because it's incredibly cheap, essentially free with our setup. They have the GPT-4s in here, and they have Claudes, and there's more out there. But this is a good kind of who's who of the top 3 companies for models, at least for like the big non-open source models. So they basically just said, great, this is what we had before, and this is how it's scored against these benchmarks. And these benchmarks are very common benchmarks: MMLU Pro, GPQA, Human Eval. Human Eval is for like code writing mostly. This is one I care about the most. Generally speaking, you can see that the scores all vary, and this is the old version of it, and it got slightly better. It's kind of hard to go above 100, so you're going to see like very small increments, but they got generally like better across a lot of these tasks. Very good to know and very nice to understand. And if you're curious about like, how do I evaluate a model and see how one's better than the other? There's no like magical perfect way, but I'd recommend 2 paths. Number one, look at the benchmarks. There's tons of them online. People do them all the time. And I would even include arenas, which are like pieces where people test side by side anonymously which ones are better. And then number 2, go off of your own vibes. Literally get a chance, play with it, try some things out, have a set of like your own challenges, because increasingly I'm going to preface this by saying that I'm going to accidentally anthropomorphize models a lot in this conversation because it's so much easier than trying to add a caveat in front of every single time I say think, for example, or personality. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of whether or not these things think or have personalities or what intelligence is or reasoning is. It's exhausting. It's fun, but it takes like hours. Instead, I'll just say excuse my anthropomorphization, I hope I said that right, of these models. And I'll just say things like, for example, they have different personalities and they have different like strengths and weaknesses, like a person might as well. So you often have to get to the point where you use the right tool for the right job. A great example is these mini ones, GPT-4o Mini, Gemini Flash. Those are the smallest models, and I won't go into why they're small, technical stuff, but they're like really tiny, and they're kind of based off the bigger ones, and they're incredibly fast and cheap. So sometimes you don't need to have like the smartest thing in the world. You want something smart, like really quick and cheap. And the score difference, for example, on this one isn't so different for some of these challenges. So it's like, you know what, it's 100%, worth it for me to spend, like 0.1 cents versus 1 cent per request if I only lose a little bit of this score because the end result for my personal testing is the same. Okay, let's move on from that. Great stuff. Recommend using it. Now, the thing I'll say is the new thing here, and I won't show any videos right now, but they're basically, well, I'll just show some background because I think it's really interesting. I'll just mute it. They're basically allowing now these newest models, they're opening up the API to allow you to interact directly with your computer. So as developers, very cool for us, we can now start to build apps where literally actions can be run on our computer for us autonomously. So they'll go through an example over here. You'll see, like this is like different tabs open, localhost, of course, because it's not real. This is all fake. They have a doc over here. They say, hey, please fill out the vendor request form for Ant Equipment Co. using data from either the vendor spreadsheet or search portal tabs in window 1. List and verify each field as you complete the form in window 2. They're kind of trying to show off something that would be a challenge normally for us because if there's no API for this data, hypothetically speaking, let's say it's only a web interface, we have to have like a scraper. It's a whole thing, and we have to make sure it works perfectly. We have to build around this website. That kind of goes out the window because you don't need to worry so much about those like little intermediary steps. Kind of task something with doing this, and it'll be able to run these actions. So you can see over here, it'll go through, it'll take screenshots of the page because it can understand the page from the screenshots. It'll then be able to click on things, navigate, search, update. You'll be able to see the information there, evaluate. Tons of really cool things here. Now that's cool, and there's tons of other great videos here. But I think what I really want to emphasize with all of this is that there's nonstop opportunities that are coming up that are brand new every single day. This did not exist really until today. I mean, there's other companies that did this a little bit. One of my favorite ones actually was trying for a bit. It never really took off. But I feel like this is probably the first real good effort here where we have an API to interact with this stuff. So I recommend everybody throw yourself at this stuff, experiment. The same reason out here, you'll get to the point where you're comfortable with all this and you can work more with this. We also had the voice-to-voice stuff that's happened recently. So there's tons of really great options. So that's the story there. Please feel free to ask me more if you want questions about the stuff. Reach out to me, message me. I love talking about it. But I will say, still very early days, tons of cool things, tons of things to understand. Look at benchmarks, look at different models, think about what the pros and cons are. We'll be using Gemini Pro Flash because it's the cheapest, but you can use whatever model you want, especially with our framework. Now let's get into actually setting up. Let's see. So this is the app we'll be actually running, and this is me kind of doing a thing. But let's get past this. We don't want to actually have it all working. Let's do from scratch. So I'm going to kill this. I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to stop and delete this. Great. So now don't have that anymore. It's all gone. And I'm going to skip a few steps here, assume you've done a couple of things. But let's kind of walk through them still anyway. So first of all, this is cursor. It looks like VS Code, but you'll see a couple of tiny things that kind of show it's not. So the first things first, what we want to do is probably get our AI Studio API key. So how you do that, let's just click on this link and I'll open it up and I'll walk you through it. It's not too painful. Get API key. I think this is I'm under my Rangle account, so it's going to be a bit of a pain in the butt. I'll fake it. I won't do the whole thing. I can set continue. So when you get to this page, this is a playground for Google AI Studio. You can do tons of stuff inside of here if you want to. I recommend playing around the prompt section over here, trying some things out, different models you can see over here. The one we'll be working with is this one essentially. So yeah, all fun, but what you want is the API key. So you can click on this and click on Create API Key. Safety setting reminder, great. What you have to do, Google, is you have to choose like applications over here if you want, or you can just create an API key in a new project if you like. Let's just assume you do that. Click on this. You click on this button. It'll make a new project for you. If this is, yeah, I can't. This is my organization account. I'm not allowed to make a new project in the Google Cloud stuff, so it's not going to work. Let's pretend it worked for you. It probably should work for you. Right away, you'll get a key, and that key is going to be just like this.
And if it doesn't work, reach out for help.
Yeah, exactly. So shouldn't be too painful, but if you have any trouble, no worries. If you get really stuck, we'll just give you one of these keys because it's basically free up until a certain point, and we'll not have a problem with that. So yeah, the goal right now is to get this key, and I wouldn't even put it into this env file yet. I realized that I moved things around, so it'll get overwritten. But just hold on to it, put it into a little text file, save it. Just this exact phrase: Google Generative AI API key equals yada yada yada. So you see that in the docs. If you look at the docs, they go into README, just like this. So once you have that saved, once you have that all good, the next thing we want to do is actually set up our environment. So I have the actual SQL the file over here. It's this huge SQL file. I know it's giant. We're not going to worry about it. It's like a bajillion lines long, but it's just pure SQL. And we can do all kinds of things with this. And what I'll be doing is making a Postgres database with this. I like Postgres and I like Prisma. So I'm using both. And you'll kind of see why in a second. Okay, so great. We have this Postgres database. Well, we have this SQL database, and we have this script over here. This script over here is a script that's going to essentially convert that SQL data dump into an actual Postgres database. It'll set it up for you. If you already have your Docker installed, and you should have Docker installed, you should have Docker running if possible. It's also something I forget to say. So one of our top instructions is make sure you have the Docker installation set up. Again, if hypothetically you can't, it doesn't work, things go wrong, no big concern. We do have backups for you. We can point to external databases that we have them already hosted, but please try to set up yourself if you can. This is fun. And the commands are pretty straightforward. What you want to do is go into the README, and there is just, well, first we want to do your pnpm install. We are using pnpm again. Let's do it in the right order. This is the problem. I always assume all this stuff's already set up on your computer. It may be not, so let's kind of go over it. Number one, Docker. Number two, pnpm. If you don't have pnpm already, this is a command you can run on your Mac. And I think this might also work now inside of Windows with the Windows environments that let you use, Bash under the hood and also like ZSH or whatever. Regardless, you should be able to run this command and install pnpm. Or you can install it with npm, or you can install it with brew. Whatever works. Pnpm is great. And unfortunately, we need it. I was testing it out without pnpm because that's great to do, and I realized it wasn't working because of versioning issues. So let's not even worry about that. Let's just use pnpm, and yeah, then you just do a pnpm install, whatever it is. I'm all good, so no big deal. But it won't take very long. Once you have pnpm installed, now we have everything we need generally to kind of get our library set up. I assume you already cloned the repo. You're already in that repo right there. And then this is the command we need to do to actually run the script. This is first for like basically permissions, because your computer's like, are you sure you're going to run a bash script? You sure? It can be dangerous. I promise you this is very boring. Go over it if you like. It's just basically installing something to a Docker. Then we run this over here. So you'll see there's a little command. It's looking to see if it can connect to your Docker database. And a fun fact, I don't know how to write bash scripts very well. I didn't write most of this. I just talked to an AI about what I wanted to do, and it helped me make it. And we tested it out, and it works. That's the nature of the beast. And I'll even show you kind of what that looks like. So great. It's doing all that stuff for us. It's all set up now. So now if we look over into here, we should have this Poke AI Postgres database running again. It's running, so it's not stopped. It's on this port, which is the general port you use for Postgres databases. I think that's like the default. Hooray, we're all good. At this point, you can just literally run dev. Any way you want to run it, press start. And then I'm using Turbo, which is, I think, now the default, actually, or It's the default recommended. I'm not sure if it's actually default. I think the next 15 just came out like today or something. Things are coming out all the time. And we can now go to localhost and see, you see this. Well, it needs to refresh and rebuild. This is the fun thing about whenever you restart a dev server, it has to rebuild everything live runtime. But okay, it's fun. I know it'll work. We'll go back in a second. Let me just talk about what this app is while it's reloading here. So the goal of this app is to kind of play with some complicated and simple things at the same time. The complicated stuff is one of the more needed things we want to do with our AI applications now is access data that is like vast, so much data, so much for a human to kind of comprehend and organize it, structure it, and provide it to a user. So yeah, great, now it works. And we can test this out by saying, show me all, or list for me all the Pokemon that are dual type with one type being dragon. Dragon's one of the types, right? What happened there? Oh, of course. Whenever I run that command, my API key kind of goes away. I need to get a new one now. It's okay. I'll just go back to the env file. Good reminder. Need to have that in there. Without that, it's not going to work. Go back here. Try this again. List for me all the Pokemon of dual types with at least one being dragon, with one being dragon. I don't think that grammatically makes sense with one being dragon. There we go. That does.
Yeah, but the API would catch that.
Yeah,
It
it
would
would.
still get
It's fine. Like LLMs are good with bad spelling, bad grammar. No problem at all.
It's
So
one of the beauties of tokenization.
yeah, exactly. So you see over here, we have everything we need. We have our data, we have our Pokemon over here, dragon one type, other non-dragon type, information over here. This thing goes through it. Even we have a little fun little card I made just for funsies. Yeah, a little analysis over here. So it's not like the fanciest app. I kind of threw this together real quick to kind of like get everything roughly visually there. But it does kind of show us some really useful things. There's a couple of things happening that are really good. I'll talk about it first from a visual like breakdown, and I'll show you the actual code that does this for you. First thing that's happening is we're taking natural language human queries and converting it into SQL. That SQL is then pulled out and structured correctly to fit into this table components. The table component is somewhat dynamic. We don't know what columns are going to be. In fact, sometimes the columns are breaking. It's a small bug. We'll fix it later. Where you don't see the column headers. This is like the Pokemon name. This is type 1, type 2. You can see them actually click on this probably. Yeah, there it is. They'll be dynamic depending on what you're asking. So there's no way to predict it, except we have some ways to navigate that, which is part of what I'll be talking about. Yeah, and then that's it. You have your results. Now, what you also do with that data is you put it into this analysis tool, a different LLM, where I just say, here's the information. Talk to me about it like you're a cool like Pokemon announcer. If you ever watch the Pokemon TV shows or play the games, there's always an announcer somewhere around there just talking about how cool things are and how cool the Pokemon are and like, whoa, they're so cool. Kind of a sports announcer. So yeah, it's going through, it's giving us some information. It's even adding some like commentary about, because I passed in the SQL. It's like, this is the SQL I used to also make it happen. So great. Here's some things you can do to make it better. Here's some other options you can have to make it better. Great, awesome, no problem. So just again, a highlight that there's different ways to use LLMs in the same application to do different things. And finally, we have this over here. How is this generated? This is my favorite thing, actually, because what we're doing here is we're generating structured data outputs from unstructured text. So very fun, very cool, very useful bit of functionality. In fact, I'd say this is probably the most powerful thing that we can do with AI. Turn unstructured data into structured data. With that, we can essentially build a bridge between a world of, like natural language and kind of like fuzziness to a world of expected APIs and inputs and props and types, etc. Once you master that kind of functionality, you can do all kinds of really cool things. So that's it. That's what we're working with. And in this, fun little exercise, our goal will be to just go through some of these exercises I said over here, some challenges, something to look at. Hey, the query generator itself could be better. You want to make it better? How would you do it? Here's some questions you might have. The badge is cool. How do you want to make that cooler? The announcer is cool. How do we make that cooler? We're using Gemini. If you want to go above and beyond and you have your own API keys, how would you switch it out to use another model instead? And what's the pros and cons for each model? These are the questions that generally ask anybody who, or myself at least, whenever I'm making, a project that uses like, AI inside of it, like how do I actually take advantage of this AI and use it in an interesting new way? So I'll take a second to give us all a breather, a break. At this point, ideally, some of you should be getting set up, should be getting past everything. If not, let us know. I won't rush ahead. So take your time. Let's just give us 2 minutes. And in that time, I'll just kind of talk about Cursor, actually. And then we can go back into actually going to the code itself and then walking the code and mapping it to what we see here.
Yeah,
So,
Della, there's just a one quick question in the chat. What license covers the repo?
I looked this up. Sorry, our repo, I didn't. Oh, yeah, I'm going to do MIT. I didn't actually do this. I was looking up the Pokemon API repo. In fact, Poke API. Let's take a look at it real quick. Right there. They have a nice license because we're using their data or their. I took their SQL and turned it into, I took their Excel documents. They had just like spreadsheets, CSVs. Thank you. Turned it into SQL. Turned that into Postgres. So this is pretty permissive. Just gonna make sure they don't use Pokemon API in any license or like commercial applications that you use that uses data. Otherwise, you're pretty much feel free to have fun with it and do what you want, fork, play with it, etc. I'll be doing MIT with our project. So I'll add that in probably at the end of this event. And so we can clearly see you guys can basically go nuts with it. Any more questions actually before I jump to my own thing? Any thoughts, any feelings, any questions about this?
I have a question. That could be something that we can cover later after the setup. Can we give a quick run through of the repository, just in case that some of us we are not familiar with Next.js, and to understand where the code goes? Is that going to be?
Yeah, I'll be doing a mapping of the code that I'm showing here. But good point. In case anyone here isn't familiar with Next.js particularly, I was going to just skip that. I'll give a quick overview of Next.js as well too. That way we can kind of make sure we're not assuming any knowledge.
That would be
In
great.
fact, why don't I start that now? I think if we're going to talk about Next.js, we can jump right into it.
That's perfect.
Okay. So Next.js. So if we don't know what Next.js is sort of a wrapper around React, oriented around kind of making certain things easier. They have certain strengths and opportunities, but they're very, very closely aligned with React, and they work tightly together with a React team. So what does it do? Next.js, for example, has something called route-based or folder-based routing. So if you go into your app folder, you will see a bunch of files. You'll see component over in folders, component, lib, Prisma, public, yada, yada. I'll go into some of the stuff like the Prisma. Lib is it's like one util file. Honestly, this is a very tiny application. These are the components I made. These are all from Shad CN. I'll go over that as well. The total app is incredibly small. I try to keep it as small as possible. This is the SQL function, again, tiny. And this is the AI code. This is the biggest file, and it's mostly boilerplate. And I'll go over that as well too. And yeah, this little thing is a helper for, well, I was trying to get this to work so I can run it both locally and in the remotes. And it's kind of wonky. So I don't know if it needs it anymore, but it helped for a bit. So we'll see if it's still needed. Aside from that, the important stuff is inside of the fact that this is, well, I'll go over server actions, but I'll go over first and foremost the routes. So instead of any sort of application that's a Next.js application, there are certain files and paths that are integral to the application's running and how it works. For example, you have layout, you have page, and that's all underneath app. Very, very important right there. What layout does, layout is sort of in this case, you can see this layout component essentially is a server-side running version of the application. That's something that Next.js does very well, is it runs both server-side and client-side code pretty intuitively. You can do some things better, of course, everything can be better, but it did a very good job kind of breaking that mold for us. Layout, TSX, is the layout for this route, which is the homepage, because we're on the app which is like the root. And you can see the HTML, you can see the body, and you can see children over here. Children in this context, passed in from the root layout, is essentially everything that's underneath that route. Now that includes the page. In this case, this is our page. Page again is very tiny. It's a server-side component as well. By default, everything is a server-side component, unless you see this command at the very top. Oops. Use client. You see that at the very top, then it's not server-side. So in this case, this page is also server-side. This is tied to not Vercel. Yeah, it is tied to Vercel. This is tied to Vercel's hosting. You can specify exactly how long certain functions or APIs are allowed to run at max before they are canceled. This is because it's all serverless. Again, not a concern when working locally, so don't worry about that too much. But if you are curious, you can look into Vercel's max duration command. But over here, we see function, return. It's very React-y. We see the Pokemon component over here. And the Pokemon component over here is the one that's actually storing the majority of the application. And we'll go over that in a second. But I want to kind of show off one thing about React to give you a really good idea of what I mean. I'm going to make a folder here called foo. And I'm going to say underneath foo, I'm going to make another file. I'm going to say page.tsx. And over here, I'm going to say, let me say, on the side, I'll show you some cursor stuff right away. So new chat. Make me a very boilerplate.
Della,
Yep.
can you just do a quick zoom for just to increase the font size so people can see a little bit better on the screen share?
No problem. Let me see if I can, it's always hard to click when I have all these screen sharing things around. So if you see my mouse moving randomly like this, because I'm moving things out of the way. Where I want this.
I think Command Plus works too.
So sorry, I'm moving on the Zoom stuff. Okay, but yeah, let's see. There we go. JS app. Enter. There we go.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, great. So simple. Nah, this is too much. Nah, this is too much. Make it even simpler. Just a hello world. No imports. It's very important to just sometimes tell off the code because it'll try to do too much sometimes. Like, no, you're doing
respectfully,
too much.
Respectfully tell off the code.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I don't need to do all that. I just want this page right here to show kind of what I'm doing. So great. We have this in our app. We have this. What does it keep saying? Hello. Did I put it hello? I said foo. Oh, it made it. I know why. Silly me. It made a new file for me. I don't need that. It lost context. Don't save. I'll just put it right in here. There we go. Okay, so we're inside of our app foo page tsx. And if we go to here and we say literally just foo. For some reason, when I press enter, sometimes it's trying to press enter in Zoom. So if you see me pressing over and over again, feel bad for me. Okay, great. So
absolutely, I get trapped in windows like that, like when I'm hosting meetings and stuff, constantly. I hear you, Della.
Okay, so great. So you can see there, hello world, great. So all this is basically, and this is a very Next.js thing. It's all about file-based and folder-based routing. So on the out route, foo works that way. If I want to do this thing for layout, I could. I won't. It's too much work for this case, but you can do all kinds of very complicated, very fancy layouts, and it gets very interesting and very complex with like URL parameters and query parameters and like sub routes that are wrapped in parentheses. It's a whole thing. Don't worry about it too much. We're not working with more than our absolute base routes. So we delete all this fake stuff over here. All we have in our application to worry about is this page. So this page over here, we open this up, we have this Pokemon counter. So this Pokemon component rather. I'll go over this component as well. But before I do any of that, any questions about next that people want to ask before we go into the actual like underlying code?
Bueller.
Nope.
Bueller.
Always feel free to ask later. Or I recommend just looking up some really great like the next tutorials. We maybe share some at the end of the meeting. But we're good. Okay, great. So then we have this component. This component is a client-side component. It's doing some state management stuff. I won't go through every single thing inside of here. I'll note some libraries that I'm using. We're using Framework Motion for animations. We are using React Markdown. React Markdown is great for any kind of like anything with LLMs, because LLMs generally do like to output Markdown for any of their structured formatted text. So having a good Markdown component is integral. And this is just basically GFM stands for something like GitHub format Markdown. It's just like a very common Markdown format and set of Markdown rules that we are applying to our React Markdown. And then we have our AI SRC and our other AI imports as well, which I'll go into in a bit. But this is the Vercel AI SDK import. They actually got the AI, literally NPM AI will install Vercel's AI SDK. So I'm just very impressed they got that library. Anyway, so we can see over here that this is a stateful component. It has like state inside of here with use state. We're having our use effects out of here doing some fancy stuff. We have this is the submit that's called whenever we actually make a request. And this is what we render over here. Again, I won't go over the nitty-gritty of this. The goal isn't to teach React and Next.js stuff, but this is kind of like the core of it. And we have inputs, we have buttons, we have animations, yada yada. And this is the entire page. Everything that you see visually is rendered right over here. The components over here, this is for the dynamic table. So you give it an array of like columns, and it's a render for you. You get an array of rows, it'll render that for you. You can search it. It has animation set up as well. Awesome. This is the actual badge. So again, if we look at, let's go back. Yeah, who's gone now? If you map this and I say, show me all berry Pokemon. Sure. Yeah, if we map what this table is, the badges and this component, I'll show you what that is. The component itself is the entirety of this app. The badge is this bad boy right over here. And this table is this table right over here. Everything else is just sitting inside of the main Pokemon component, including this like scrolling analysis over here. We can see that if we look over and find analysis, case sensitivity. Or use the trick. Haha. Right there. So unless it's a tab for it. So this is the actual header. So great. We can kind of see everything you want there. Awesome. Now that we've kind of gotten the visual front end React Next.js stuff out of the way, I'll talk about the more important stuff, and that is the AI specific stuff. So what is Vercel AI SDK? Let's look at the docs real quick. Vercel AI SDK. Vercel AI SDK is a very, very useful library for kind of making it much easier for you to write complicated LLM-based applications, as well as integrate in with different providers and swap them out very easily. So you see some providers they support. You'll see, OpenAI is Azure, which actually has mostly OpenAI under the hood, Anthropic, Bedrock, Google, Mistral, Grok, Perplexity, yada, 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 yada. Tons of providers. You can see even more over here if you're really curious, and all their what they support, and even how to use each provider if we go over into the provider section. And I'll do that in a second. But let's go first back into the docs. So the important thing here is if we go right into the most basic overview here, we kind of see the most basic example of something here. So they import generate text from AI. They import OpenAI from the AI SDK / OpenAI. The providers come from these endpoints. So you'll see, for example, Anthropic is AI SDK Anthropic. You'll see Google, AI SDK / Google, Mistral, same thing. And you can do custom ones if you want to. And we don't need to worry about that today, but a lot of diversity for how you can kind of make this all work for you. But the important thing here is that if we are to use, let's say, Google, this is kind of what we see right now. This is what we see under the hood. We would see generate text. We would see an import from Google from the AI SDK / Google. And then we would say generate text and pass in this object. This is a very basic, the most basic bare bones minimum MVP requirement for making this work. Number one, you define the model you want to use, because even though you're saying Google, Google actually has lots of models. They have 1.5 Pro, 1.5 Flash. They have just one. They have latest, there are different versions you can see over here. They'll actually have like numerical counts. Luckily, it's typed, so you'll even see that inside of the library itself. And like a prompt. This prompt is just asking what is love, and then this is a quick answer for you. Straightforward, no complexity, and it works. Now, while that works, we do a bit more than that. And what I want to kind of like go over here is the core building blocks first and foremost, and then I'll show you how I'm implementing them. So, okay, well, why don't we jump into how we do generate text in our application. So if we go over into our Pokemon AI, let's close all of our searching things. Let me go away too. I try to comment things out as best as possible. So some inline information that hopefully will help everyone out with understanding things. But for the first thing to note, this is the query that is actually firing to make our request to get the data for this page over here, and actually what we pass into this over here. So this is like the most important query. I just call it generalized AI powered Pokemon query. I was not very good at giving it a concise name, and I'd rather be clear. So the first thing we see over here is the model. So we do import, Google from top over here, Google from AI SDK / Google. And we say, great, let me get Gemini 1.5 Flash latest. We get the model right there, and then you're good to go. There's tons of other models available here. If you like do this, and I think, yeah, it'll even suggest them for you. If you look at the typing, if you go inside of here, and you're really curious and you go all the way deep into this like section and look at the actual provider and see like the model IDs, you'll see all the models that are available for you. Flash latest, Flash 002, Pro latest, Pro, yada, 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 yada. This is a fun little trick. Actually, you can see at the end of any typing of this sort to help with autocomplete, but neither here nor there. Great, now you have your model. And you can see we're using generate text, like we saw in the example. We're doing a slight deviation though. So while we have model over here, model, in fact, we can even just do this if we want to be lazy. We can also see that we don't have prompt like we saw in this example over here. We have system. Now, that's a slight difference, and I want to kind of explain real quick what that is. So it's a very common pattern for every one of these providers to create what's called a system prompt for these models. It's not true for every single thing. For example, even our newest GPT-4o models, not 4o, O1 models, the fancy ones you might have heard about that are better at reasoning. Those models don't have system prompt functionality yet, although they probably will in the future. What system prompts are basically are top level prompts you give to a model to say, this is what you are. This is how I want you to behave. They generally have a bit more weight on how they behave than subsequent messages that you give it, which can be provided in literally it's going to be a messages property, although I don't use it in this case. But if you were to, for example, do a chat, you might give it messages, which is going to be an array of messages. And so a good example of what you might want to do with this case is say, hey, you're going to be a chatbot. Your job is to talk back and forth about like our customers' needs. And I want you to behave a certain way. You tell all that over here, and then you give it a list of messages, and it'll keep that in mind after every message. So it's a great way to kind of give it an overall kind of guided personality and set of like functionalities and tools and abilities. So great, we have the generate text there. Now, once we have the system prompt, and I'll go over what that is in a second, and go over the guts of this as well too. It's a little bit overly verbose. Maybe you guys can simplify this for me. But once you look at the system prompt and we go down over here, we can see we also have this prompt. The prompt is just a query that comes in from the function being called itself. So this is the natural language query. So if you look at that code itself, this is going to be essentially whatever I type into this section right over here is passed in right there. So great, we have generate text. We see that it's an asynchronous function call. Remember that, because of course it's going to an API and doing something that's even more asynchronous than you can predict, because we can't really know how long it'll take to respond to a lot of these things. The result of that can be structured. There's quite a few things you can get out of this. You can get like, you can see over here, if I just like type in all the abbreviations, or I wish I want to, whatever. You can look at the type over here that's returned will tell you more information about what's actually there, but it gives you lots of information that's useful for you. Right now, we only care about the text return. You see a nice little tooltip to generate text. Great. So once you call it, you get the text back. And what do we do with that text? Let's go down. We take that text, and I do some cleaning up over here. It's not always necessary, and depending on what I do with the AI itself, it can be kind of like completely unnecessary. But sometimes, and it's very common, and I mentioned how LLMs have to use Markdown. I ask for SQL as a response here, and it's giving me SQL, but it's very commonly, it comes down with SQL Markdown tags wrapped around it, which is not a big problem if you want to show it to the user, but it's the big problem if you want to pass this into what's it called? An actual SQL request. So they don't like to see this in the beginning and the end of it, so I kind of remove it. I don't know if I need all this, but I'm basically just trying to remove all new lines. I can use trim if I wanted to as well. So I might, if I want it to be, more kind of like modern, I'd say trim over here instead of saying replace with all the new lines and stuff like that, but no big deal. This basically consistently gets me a string that's not going to be a problem. Now, that string is the SQL. What do I do with that string? Well, I'm going to pass it into this Pokemon SQL get function. So this is the actual thing that connects to our database. It's making the request to the database over here. This is from that DB file I mentioned before. That was kind of a helper. Don't think we need as much that I'm using. Before I was using Vercel's local, because Vercel actually has a NPM package for connecting to Postgres databases and doing requests. Problem with that is that it works terribly locally, apparently. I tried to make it work. I looked up online and I saw like nonstop complaints about how it doesn't work locally. So I switched to using regular PG. So no problem. Locally, PG, remote, we'll use the Vercel's PG library. PG, again, is Postgres. So great, we have our SQL query, and I'm passing the query here. Again, came from the LLM, and this is the results. And literally just return it. That's all I'm doing. Otherwise, throw an error. Nice thing about LLMs is they very naturally try to do error handling for you. And I'll talk about even how to like guide the LLM whenever suggests things for you to do it more in the way that you want or to like fill gaps in your process. But that's in this later half. So great, we have our response from the Pokemon SQL get query comes back. It is going to be destructured over here into the rows and fields. So rows are, in this case, these individual rows, and fields are defining the columns, essentially. So great, I have the rows, I have the fields, and the query over here. You'll notice I do this JSON parsing is because what I'll get back from this Postgres rows and fields object are like not serializable. Now, what does that mean? So if you ever look inside of an object, let's say you create a new class inside of JavaScript, and I'll do this right now, just a quick example. Oops, not PHP source. Let me go inspect here. This is an important lesson for anybody who has to work with this sort of thing back and forth in general. But let's clear up the console. Of course, I have console errors. It's okay, you're fine. I was doing fun things with you. If I go in here and I say, I don't know, new URL, I need to give it a URL. Const foo equals new URL. HTTPS google.com. I think that works. Is it new URL? URL. There we go. Foo. Great. I have a cool fancy object. It's like a URL like tree object. Very useful for all kinds of things. But you'll notice that it's actually has a prototype. It says URL over here. If you open this up, you'll see there's tons of these getters, these functions, these like underlying like fancy logical pieces. And these are basically what we describe as non-serializable. If something is serializable, it can be turned into JSON. Think of it that way. And if you think of proper JSON, you can't put functions in there. You can't put class types and prototypes inside of there. Really just like a key value dictionary, right? So you have to make sure, and this is why they have this, on this, they have the to JSON. I say this, to JSON. Well, now it's just a string like that, because nothing else is going on here. But this is serializable. Strings are serializable, pure objects are serializable, numbers, booleans, etc. But you cannot make like classes and fancier prototypical inheritance fields serializable. So we get that with this as a response from the SQL get. There's all this extra, let's call it useful tooling under the hood for this stuff, but I don't need any of it. So I just do a very, very ugly serialization. You can just JSON parse stringify things, and it turns it back into like a pure JSON object. Take the rows, stringifying it, strips out all that stuff, and then parsing it. I promise you there are easier ways to do this. This is the ugliest way, but it's also the clearest way. And the query, the original query that was like passed in, or not passed in, that was created by the LLM, passed into the SQL get. Now that is basically the whole function. This generate text function, or this generalized AI powered query thing, if you look at the component over here, we get the result back, and then we set it as the output. We do some like stuff over here. This is actually the AI analysis function that's called, and this is using streaming, which I want to go over. And then this is, and then there's more that's done over here for generating the badge over here. So you can see I'm doing 3 requests, 3 separate AI pieces that are combined to make this application, where I just say, make the query for the data, make the analysis for that data, and make the badge for that data. Set that all to my application. That is the lion's share of what's going on in the application. I kind of walk through it. I'll go over a little more detail, but I want to pause and let people ask questions for what I've done so far.
The biggest thing, Della, is we're at halftime, so I just want to make sure we're getting to the point where we're showing the challenges, so people can have some time to get their hands dirty.
Yeah, the goal is we'll set the challenges in about just under 10 minutes. So we should be good to go pretty soon. So yeah, like this is I've done a lunch with a walkthrough. We'll walk over the smaller functions here and there. But any questions so far about what I've shown so far? Anything, any confusing things? Any questions? Any concerns?
Stephanie?
Yes. A quick question, because we saw the function, the server component for the table, and for the analysis, what generate the content on the right-hand side, is that a part of the function by the stream analysis function?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what we'll go into next, actually. So if that's the question, why don't we just do it? Here it is. So great. Now over here, we have the results passed in here. We have the original question from the user, and we have the query. So I'm passing everything from the natural language question to the user made, to the query the LLM created, to the results of that query, into another piece over here. And I'm using stream text. So stream text is a little bit different than generate text. Generate text returns this all at once, one big plunk of data. Stream text streams text in slowly. You can see it once in a while, this thing comes in a wave, not all at once. Not just animation, it's actually literally streaming in. So, you know, when you use either, it's up to you. Sometimes you kind of really have to use generate text. You can't stream certain things in for whatever reason. Sometimes you can't stream text, and it's probably often a better experience for a user if you want to give them back a response faster than having them wait for longer. It all depends on what makes sense, but I'm showing you both ways just to kind of give you guys an opportunity to play with them. It's already written out for you. You can modify them if you want to, but you'll see a lot of the same stuff. You'll see the model. You'll see instead of generate text, you'll see stream text. That's the same structure over here, systems over here, and there's a prompt over here. The exact same thing that happened before. And the response is not text, it's text stream. And over here, you can see, I actually console log it to kind of show you if you want to see what that looks like. Each delta being brought in, a delta being, you know, the piece, you know, from the delta between what was there already and what's new, essentially. Each chunk, each new piece brought in. And then we have the stream. The stream is this little fun create streamable value function, which comes from AI RSC. So we just say, great, this is a stream of value. I'm going to return stream dot value. And when it's all done, stream not done. So that just lets it know, close the stream off, you're done, you're complete. Very, very useful, works well, very simple. Hooray, you have your streaming text. And then finally, the badge. The badge is using structured output as an object. I'll show you the documentation for this first. Structured object output. Let's go over to generate structured data. So this is what I think is honestly the most powerful thing you can do with AI and LLMs in general. You can define using Zod. If you don't know what Zod is a schema library. It's very popular. A structure like an object, and say, hey, I don't want to generate text or a stream of text. I want to generate an object. Same thing, same model structure. Although some models are very good at objects structuring and generating, some are not. A great example of one knowing what's the strengths are each model are is valuable. You say, great, this is what I want. I want you to give me an object that has a recipe, let's say. So that's an object as well, it has a name, it's a string, ingredients, and the steps. And you see this is defining the structure of that object. You can go further and actually add things like describes. And I'll show you that, I think, a little bit in mine. I think it's right over here. Yeah. So with that, you get an object on the other end of that. That is essentially something that you can just put into your application as a standardized object with types and all that kind of stuff, and everything will work. Yeah, like if you look at this over here, it tells you the exact response it's expecting. I'm expecting image URL, header, subheader, sections, background color, text color, width, height, and that all powers this. So what's going on with this? Well, you get analysis, which is the string analysis, which is this fun thing that's very top over here. You get the SQL result, which is the any type of, let's not lazy there. But that's the array of items that you get from the database. And you're saying, I want you with this information. What's the prompt here? Based on the following analysis and SQL result, generate a structured object for a Pokemon badge card. Choose appropriate colors, content, and a relevant Pokemon API sprite URL. This is something that's inside of its knowledge base. It's been trained on something on the internet. It actually knows what the Pokemon API sprite URLs look like. And it's got them essentially like, I'll give an example over here to helpful, but I wouldn't have to do this. It just knows. But I say, great, this is kind of what I mean. Pokemon ID right there. That's the PNG. That should be the URL. Yeah, and show this content is concise and fits well within a small badge card. That's it. And then the schema, instead of, we've seen the model, we've seen the prompt before, we've seen system prompts, which I think you can still do with this, but we don't need to here. All I care about is the schema. The schema over here is the Zod's definition of the object I want. I want an object that has an image URL, string, that's URL typed, part of the definition you can do, and this is the description of it. The descriptions are also helpful for making the object be more precise, let's say. So header, subheader, sections, background color, all in there. I even say use Tailwind. And all of this is passed into the actual underlying component. If you look at how it's done, generate this data, I set it to set badge data. I have badge data over here. I can see it is going to be used here. Click on badge card. Image URL, header, subheader, sections, background color, text color. Although I just hardcode the width and height. I got lazy in the end. Like, I don't want it to be so dynamic. But it'd give me one if I wanted to, and it'd change the height and width for me. And then that card takes all the information and it puts it in the appropriate places for the class names. Those are Tailwind classes. Because these classes are runtime, I have to do one thing with Tailwind, where I basically say, make all the classes be available to me right away, because they're not going to, normally Tailwind is, one great thing about it is that it doesn't pull in the classes until you build it. And it's a great, I don't see any, instances of, I don't know, overflow hidden in your application. So I won't pull in this class. But because it's all happening on runtime, we need to say, reload all this stuff. But that's fine. Implementation details. And yeah, that's it. That's how we make the badge. You can do really fancy stuff with this. You can do things like sentiment analysis. You can do things like generating mock data. You can do things like turning data from one structure to another structure for you dynamically. It's one of the most powerful things you can do, I think, with AI, and I recommend really playing with this if you get a chance to. But yeah, that's it. That's the whole app. You can look at where the renders happen and where all these pieces come and go, but there's not really much else going on. One thing I'll add is that I do a schema dump of the entire database from the Pokemon API into Prisma, and this is a big part of how our model knows to make the appropriate queries. Now, this is maybe the last thing I'll mention. So when making a query, how does the model know what query to make? Well, I literally just say, this is the entire schema of the database. This is it. This is what it looks like exactly. And I got this from the part of the Prisma generation, like CLI. We get this in here, and then I just say inside of our Pokemon AI TSX, right over here, I literally just do this. Now, it's huge. This is, as you can see, this is a very, very large file. It's something like 60,000 tokens. What is a token? A token is roughly 4 characters in the English language, and it's how generally you measure one unit that is passed into a model in terms of its complexity, its costs, and its like limitations. Models don't have unlimited token windows. They can't just take 10 million tokens. They can't take every book that ever existed and put it into this context and then answer a question about it. They have limitations, but different models have different limitations. Gemini Flash has a 2 million context window and it's quite high quality, and not as well as being free, made it a good option for this setup. Although this is 60,000 tokens, so I think 60,000, something like that. We can always check that out, and I'll show that when we're actually working. Most models can handle that, or at least the big public ones. So they might also work, but please try it out. Try different models, be curious to see how it feels, because I promise you they'll work and behave differently, and they'll fail differently as well too. There are failure cases here. I don't handle any errors right now. That's something I want people to try to do themselves and think about how to handle errors well in this kind of environment and move forward. I might do that if I have some time in the background, but overall, the idea here is this is a clean slate, or as close to clean slate as possible for you to improve upon. Yeah, and over here, give it some, you can see I just give it some advice, some errors I've seen that happen before. I'm like, hey, don't do this. You do this a lot. Don't do this instead. Here are some examples of good queries. Here's another example or two. I probably don't need all these examples. In fact, it might be good for you to remove them and see how good it does, because examples are really helpful, but they can also overfit to the examples and then be very stuck on it and just try to do everything like those examples. So there's a pro and con to it. But it all depends on how you write these things. Like even having the entire schema inside the text here isn't the best idea, honestly. I think, in fact, what would be better is if you turn this into a vectorized database and do a dynamic query, depending on what the query of the user is, pulling in the appropriate tables to then compare and then like say, great, this is all I need to make the right query. Much more concise, much more elegant, I'd say. Although there's pros and cons to every single approach for everything here. And this is also very much, like I said, new. So experiment, try things out. But yeah, that's literally everything. That's it. Now I'm done. At this point, I would recommend going to the README and looking at the challenges. I would say to start off, for anybody here who doesn't want to do anything too complicated, I'd say try really, really simply going into this big system prompt over here and playing with it. Remove the whole thing if you want and see what it does without any one of these schemas, and just say, hey, you're using the Pokemon API database, make a query that works well with it and see how poorly it does, or how good it does. Try adding it in, try modifying the prompts, try removing the additional stuff, try adding your own flavor to see if you can kind of improve upon it. And if you want to be really clever, try adding error handling. If you have some experience, I'd recommend even switching this out to using their agent structure, which allows you to have tool calling, so you can have tools that call the actual API requests with steps and system prompts and all that kind of stuff as well too. Very, very complicated, very cool stuff. But only do that if you're very, very experienced with this already, or you have some like if you retouch Vercel AI SDK, or otherwise you'll probably get overwhelmed. And then if you feel good with that, or if you know what, I don't want to do that instead, I would recommend looking at, let's go into the README, the badge. Because the badge is using the structured object output, it's a really good place for you to play with adding new properties and seeing how it works, removing properties, like dealing with data being passed through, trying to really kind of encourage it to create things that are creative, but still kind of like useful and structured. I honestly think this is one of the most fun things to play with. Again, if you are bored by that, you can try switching this out to using React RSC, React Server-Side Component Framework. Basically, they can stream down the components instead of me just rendering on the client side, which is fun. It works really well. But I feel like that'd be too complicated. So instead, I just kind of showed you a very basic version. But if you want to be, brave and try it, go for it. Other than that, let's see, want to try with the streaming. Play with the streaming stuff you like. The announcer itself is cool. How do you make it better? How do you improve upon the streaming? How do you improve upon how it talks to you? Do you like what it's providing you? Is it too much, too little? How can you structure it? I'd recommend, if you want to see some of this API, if you go over into the docs over here and look at something like the AI SDK like core, look at the stream text, they'll give you much more information about all the different properties you can pass in here. We use model, system, and prompt, and this is the messages, and this is for like a chat experience. You can see the different ways a message can be written out. But there's more things here. There's tools. I mentioned that before. Don't worry about that too much unless you want to go into making a better agent. But there's max tokens. There's temperature. There's top P, top K, present penalty. Most of the stuff, don't worry about it. maybe you want to play with seed. Maybe you want to play with some of this like other fancy stuff here. But I recommend if you want to are really curious about changing how the the streaming announcer works, is play with the prompt itself and play with the max tokens and temperature. That'll give you a really good vibe for how to kind of like change the almost the personality of a model under the hood when it's talking to you. Great, you've done all that, or you're bored at your home, you want to do more stuff, or maybe none of this is interesting enough to you. Maybe you want to play with different models. Maybe you don't like Gemini model. Maybe you couldn't get it working. Maybe you have an OpenAI key working. Great, try switching it out. See how easy it is. It should be quite simple and straightforward. But feel free to reach out if you're stuck, because everyone's stuck at everything. You know, that's life. And I can help you with that. But what's one of the most powerful things about this in Vercel AI SDK is that to change out the model from using OpenAI, Google, whatever, it's literally just like this line here. So if using Google, I'll use OpenAI or Anthropic, whatever it is, right? And the right model name. And yeah, that's it. Those are our challenges. This is the code base. Feel free to start hacking and improving and iterating on this. Yeah, you should have 45 minutes. Any questions? We can start asking them, but if you don't have any questions, I say go for it. It's quiet, and I'm terrified that
Nope, you're all good.
it's great.
I know that exact feeling. It's like either nobody is following or everybody's following. It's either perfect or terrible.
No, I was thinking I maybe disconnected.
Oh, that would be, oh my God. And I'm
and I
just
was
it's like you
talking
have
to
all these
myself
missed
for like,
messages on your phone.
yeah, for
I'm
like
like,
10
Della,
minutes.
it's shut down. It's terrible.
All right. Okay, so I'll give you guys all a break. I'll actually be right back to you. I'll get a quick drink. And then I'll jump right into, if you have any questions, just give them to any of the helpers and they'll throw my way and I can answer them for the whole crowd. And I'll jump into just kind of coding along and hacking and showing some examples of how I use cursor in the background. So be right back. I am back. Do we have any questions?
We don't have anything in the chat except for praise for your beautiful soul.
I'll believe it. I won't look a GIF
You
or
have
something.
access to the chat. I'm not lying to you. When have I lied to you, Della?
That's a good point. I do have chat here. So many chats though. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I feel like we have a friendship that I can just be blatant and be like, no, that's terrible, Della.
Yeah,
Do it again.
yeah, and I would appreciate that, to be honest. Okay, okay, cool. So we're good. Let me.
Oh, we do have a question.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious how stuff would change if we wanted to implement memory.
Ah, great. So why don't I why don't I do that? And when I answer the questions first and see what's going on, like, what do we do next once the app is running locally? So much information, tons of information, right? But you don't have to do anything in particular. You can just listen along and learn more if you want, or you can start like trying some of those challenges I mentioned in the README, like playing with the prompts or creating new properties for the objects. For example, if you went into here and said, I want to see if I can get this model to generate for me under the property here. What's an example of property I might care about? Let's see. Competing or similar, let's say similar Pokemon, something like this. I didn't type anything. As you saw, my AI did all for me, and I'll tell you more what that's going on there. But yeah, great. It'll give me an array of strings of optional similar Pokemon. Let's see if it even works. And then let's go right here, debugger. You can see an example of the sort of power that you have. Let me see. What are all the best? No, it's too open-ended a question.
All the
What
grumpy ones.
all the grumpy Pokemon? Yeah. What are all the? I don't know if there's a query in the database for grumpiness. What are all the Pokemon that appear in Gen 3? I don't know if I can do this. Let's see. Cool. We have our debugger here. We can see exactly the amount of this generated badge data now. Cool. So the Pokemon that it cares about in this image URL is going to be I don't know what 384 is, unfortunately. But there is content here. You can see. I don't know. I don't even know what it ends up showing here. But it does give you some Pokemon: Torchic, Trico, Mudkip, Groudon. These are all from similar generation as well too. So great. And the badge will be over here. So fun stuff there. You could be much more creative than that. That was me doing it in 4 seconds. But that's the whole point. Like, that data did not exist before, and it generated that for me in a structured way, giving an array of strings. If you can think of something that's more relevant or more valuable or more powerful, everything from the UI to the UX, to the text that you see on the screen, great way to just kind of get a handle for creating or modifying or enhancing the objects. But aside from that, I think the memory thing is a good point. So how does memory work in this context? Memory is very different depending on how we want things to behave in our application. The most traditional way you want memory to behave in an application is with a chat interface. You have like a chat bot and you say, hey, I want to, I don't know, ask it a question. It'll save things for you, and then it will just completely, keep the thread going as accurately as possible. So if you talked about the weather earlier, say, hey, what's the weather like in Toronto? It has a request for you. It gets the data back for you. So this is the weather. And you say, oh, what should I wear for that? What should I wear for that is going to be in the context of what was written before. That's like the most simple, basic memory, the memory of the previous, exchange that you had. And that's mostly built into the underlying logic of these tools with the messages API. So let me kind of show you what that looks like. Let's get into it. So you can see over here, generate text for this generalized AI-powered Pokemon query. Has model, it has system, and it has prompt. Way down over here. Now, the problem is prompt is not compatible with messages. You can't have both at the same time. Prompt is all about this sort of like one-off. You see that most often when you think of it almost like an oracle in a room. They can ask one question to, and then the next question has to come in. That's kind of how I think about this pattern. You got to think in advance what I'm going to ask it. here's the question, you leave, and the next person is a different person, different context for it. It doesn't even remember what happened before. It's completely closed off from that information. Useful in a lot of cases. Making a badge for you dynamically is great. You don't need to remember the history of the previous badge that's made for you. But it'd be nice in a chat or nice and even more interesting non-traditional applications to remember the history of the application in some way. And in that we can do messages. Or we can put the messages dynamically into the system prompt. I wouldn't want to do that though. Taking advantage of the messages API is better. So how do we do that? Well, first things
The other
first.
question, sorry, Della. The other question I'm kind of thinking about, at least in the case of memory, it's like there's memory as in a context window, and then there's like historical memory through an app. So it's like pulling like profile memory and stuff like that. So it's like, anyways, just a thing that I was also adding to the concept where it's like we're talking about possibly two different kinds of memory. Are we talking about context window or are we talking about like storage?
Even more kinds too. Like, yeah, like it's a good point. Like to some degree, if we think about, again, anthropomorphization here, but if we think about the way the human brain works, we have like our short-term, long-term memory, we have our like immediate like context, and everything in between. It's kind of somewhat fuzzy. The thing is that, LLMs can kind of do the same thing, but in a completely different way. Like if there's data, in this case, a great example is a database. It's not like this entire database, every single table of the 100, there's 164 tables inside of this database. Not all of them are inside the context window. In fact, there's a query to get the right data for you and then use it. So that's almost like external memory that it has to like remember and pull in the relevant context. And this is often referred to as like RAG, retrieval augmented generation. That's kind of a weird memory. And there are very complex RAG setups that also use like historic conversations that you've had with it as part of what it pulls in for you. Even something as simple as ChatGPT now stores historic pieces of like context about what you said to it as like snippets of memory, although I think it just puts that right into its system prompt. Regardless, there's tons of different ways to have historic information you've had with this model, or even external information this model, be dynamically or statically applied to it to help with its, like communication with you in general. But one of the most basic, simplest ways is the messages API, like this. And messages, this would be, first and foremost, how you would write the very first query. So switching from prompt to messages, this should work. Let's test it out. We'll do it in steps because we don't want to like go a mile and have it break. Give it a refresh. So all I'm doing right now is I'm saying, hey, I'm giving you a messages array instead of having my prompt. And I'm giving you one message. It's a role user, and this is the query they gave you as the content. Other roles, for example, are system, tool use, and I think there's like 2 or 3 other ones. The ones we care about right now for memory probably gonna be user and system. User being the user, system being the historic response it gave as well, because it's important that it has that in its memory. What did I say earlier? What was the last thing I said to you? If I forget that, I won't be able to give you a really good answer. So let's see. What are all the electric dual type Pokemon? Is it electric or is it thunder? No, electric.
It's electric.
Cool. So seems to be working so far, so good. Just rendering this table, which takes the longest. I wonder why. I think there's something in my code that's messy there.
It could be how it's parsing the database, maybe?
Who knows? Because this part over here requires this to be done to even get that working. So it's just taking the longest. I think it's tied to like the rendering of this. This is the third request, and it's waiting for that to be complete before it renders. So it's just got
probably
timing issue. Anyway, great. This is dual type. You'll see electric. I just talked about electric types, and this is showing you one of them. This is Voltorb or Electro. I always forget which one's which. Anyways, yeah, like fun bits of information over here for you. You have a lot of data there, and I didn't do much other than switch the setup like this. Now, if you want to have better memory, you'd want to store and keep the historic conversation you've had with this. Now, again, one thing that's nice about Vercel AI SDK is that they really try to help with this as much as possible. I can, for example, store this in like like state. And I'll do that first. I'll store it just in a use state and then bring that back. But just before I do that, Vercel AI SDK has a nice set of tools for this already built in. Where is it? They have this inside of their state handling loading state. I think it's that one. I think it's one of these things over here. I think it's this one. Managing. No, I don't care about that. Chatbots. It's called like AI state. AI state. That's what I want. No, that's fine. I'll go back to this one. So yeah, they have things like AI state, which is a way for you to, I won't go into it, doesn't matter much. Essentially store and get data that you pass back and forth from the server. We don't need to do that though. We'll just do a regular, very simple one for like clarity. So I'm gonna go inside of this place where it's called, and I'm gonna say, I'm gonna add a new prop for you. Right here, is it? Const message history. Great. I can type you a little better. I think it's literally called message from there. I think that's right. There's like two different message types. That's fine. We can kind of look at it real quick and see what it looks like if we're curious. ID, created ad, content, tool, UI, role. A lot of these are optional. The ones we care about are role and content. And the IDs is unfortunately not something we have right away. So let me just I think there's another one that's like sibling to this, but I'll just do this instead. I'll say partial. Or I'll say omit. So again, I'm lazy. Don't judge me too much for this. Omit ID. And I did create that too. Is it commas? No, like that. It was right the first time. Great. So now it expects this to be a message without ID included at. Great. So what I want to do is I want to use message history, pass it back and forth with the actual chat so that it's part of how it talks to you. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, first things first, let me make sure I'm passing in the message history into the request here. Part of it goes through. And then the output should also now expect right down here, message history, or I'll say updated message history. And we'll go to that in a second. So we have that. And remember how we destructured and got text from here? We can also get, I think, messages this way. Response messages. Cool. We want to debug this and make sure it's all right. I don't remember exactly the syntax here, so we'll have to do some fiddling. I don't know if this is, for example, just the new messages or the old and new messages together. Either way, we can make it work. But this guy over here doesn't exist as a type, so let's add you into the type response. It's very top over here, query results. Yes, thank you. And yes, please input that for me. As you can see, I type almost nothing at all. It just knows what I want most of the time, which saves a lot of time. Again, cursor is great. Cursor with chats are great. I can talk about it forever, but let's not. Let's get this working first. Okay, great. So now, second argument here. Yeah, thank you. I remembered message history. And I need to actually pass that in to here. No. Let's do it differently. I need to do yeah, thank you. Why are you complaining now? Message history. Oh yeah, this is the problem with there's two different types of messages. I also forget which ones they are. Not a big deal. I'll just add any because I'm lazy, or I'll just do as messages like that. As any. Thank you. Don't do what I do. Don't do what Della does. Don't as
Yeah, do as
anything.
I say. Don't.
Yeah. Get the right type, but we'll too lazy for that right now. Great. So now this thing over here should be core tool message. Okay. I'll just add you as well too. I'll fix that in a bit. I just want to see what the data is first and foremost though. So let me stop and run this thing in debug mode. I do like debug mode the most. So I'm gonna kill, I'm going to open, I'm going to debug, and I'm going to put a debugger right over here so I can see everything before it even goes to the Pokemon SQL GET request. Let's go back here. Refresh. Oh, and it also should, inside of here, I do have an empty array at the beginning. Great. Yeah, this is good enough for now. It'll complain about types, but what's new? Okay. What are all of the different oh, it refreshed now. What are all the different ground type Pokemon? Great, debugger. So we can kind of see what's going on now. We can look inside and see what the response is. I think I should see number one. Message history should be an empty array, sensible. The query is what I said right there, great. And if we go down and look at the response messages, haha, you get this. I can't see it because my zoom thing's in the way. Move it down a second, there we go. I couldn't even see what's going on. So we get text, which is the SQL query. Good to see, actually. This is literally the query it's making for us. And we get response messages, which is a more structured output of that. Role assistant, content, yada, yada, yada. Cool. Let us, with that information, make some updates. Let's go back to here. So we are getting back the right message structure. We can pass that back and forth without any issue. In fact, I think we'll use your content query is fine. Yeah, that works. I can then say update message history is going to come out of, I'll add any you too. I'll add any everything here. Because I have to know you don't type right. You have to deal with this. So now I know result also has those messages. So I'll just say set perfect. Again, it just knows what they want. So now it's going to be saved in message history. And that'll be part of the reoccurring messages that you get back and forth from the actual application. We don't have anything to show this off though. So it'll work almost likely. We'll see like let's get the debugger going here. I don't want some more. We'll see this like properly keeping a track of the history because, well, actually no. Let's actually do another check here. So I want to see what happens when we're not getting back the user's message as well here. So let's actually do a combination here. I need to combine you with what was there before. So I'll say something like const updated message history. Great. Take you. And then I say, I'll just actually I'll say updated history instead. Updated messages. See, this is the problem with naming things. I can never stick to anything. Great.
It's always the hardest job of a developer.
Yeah. Update messages there. I know. Don't worry about it too much. And then we go here and say, great, now we have the updated messages, but this is all what was there before. And this is what's new. We saw inside of the response over here, when we looked at it, that wasn't actually, in fact, we can see it again, if I jump back into it, if I go into debug console, or if I just do like a new line jump like this, we can see that these old messages were not including the messages I created, just the new ones. So ergo, we're not getting back everything here, just the delta. So I'll just combine them, output them. There's probably a property that has all of them in there, but again, I'm moving quickly here, so move fast, break things works fine in this kind of environment. Messages.
Just not when you're building submarines.
Yeah, exactly. Then we have update message right there. Great. This was the no, that's gonna be the wrong order. I want that to be the end. So I'll do it in like this. Thank you. So now let's say there's the entire history. So I'm pretty confident that'll work. But I don't have anything that kind of shows me that history. So I'm gonna just update this Pokemon component real quick. It's as we know now, it's the message history is being passed in, it's being updated every single time. That'll keep track of the memory. But I want like a nice component for this. I want a very simple dialogue to pop open whenever I press a notable icon in this page next to the input, ideally, that shows me the message history of, history. Make it look nice and thematically match this page. Use Shatsian. I don't know if I have the Shatsian component yet, but we can just install it. But it's a good example of kind of how I use these LLMs. I'm using Claude Sonnet 2.5. You can have different models you can use inside of here, O1 Mini, O1 Preview, Gemini if you want, Sonnet, yada, yada. And you can see it's just suggesting the code. It'll tell me exactly why it's doing that. It's telling me what it's importing. Like Lucide is for the icons, scroll area. Do I have scroll area installed already? And dialogue. Do I have dialogue installed? I don't think I do. Let's just check real quick. Packages, scroll area. I do have. Dialogue, I don't have. So why don't I install it? Easy peasy. First things first, I'll get that terminal. And I'll say P and no, it's a npx shad dialogue. Shatsian, if you don't know what it is a really useful sort of like a very Next.js compatible library for creating components. Very, very blank slate components, nothing very fancy. They're all Tailwind based. You install them, and then they actually end up being installed in your file inside of your like components folder. Ooh, although I think I made a mistake and I have two of these. Oh, I made a source folder. It got confused. That's okay. I'll just move it. I don't want to have a source folder here. I'm going to put you inside of this one. No. You know
Yeah,
what?
you gotta grab one down.
Yeah, I'm gonna just, let me do this. I'm gonna move you inside of here. There we go. Move out UI. That's fine. And then let us go into this component again. And let me apply your suggestions. Great. You can see over here, you can say yes or no individually. So I can say no to that if I don't want that, but I do. You can modify that. You can see exactly what's dipping in line. Added some styling there. Added a dialog.
Is it still importing from the right place? Because it created the component/UI thingy.
Yeah, look, it's
okay,
fine.
yeah, sweet.
Yeah, great. It's assuming that was the same place, but that was my own like fiddling with it earlier. So don't worry about that. It's fine. Great. Inputs, dialogue, all the stuff inside of there. It's going to have the message history inside of here. It's assuming content enroller there already because it just knows enough about the syntax that people use. I can accept it and see if it works. I didn't write a single thing. We can test this out. We'll press next here. I don't think I get debugger anymore. Do I still have it? I do. I'm pretty confident this will work. Who knows? I now have this little icon there. Let's click on it. Nothing there right now. Let me say, what are all the ground type Pokemon? Yeah. I think that's the time. You can now see in the history. fun. Things fail. Well, this is one of my favorite errors. Objects not valid as React children. Hooray, things still break. Let's see what's going on.
Of course, it's development.
It would have been great if it worked off the bat. You know, it happens sometimes, but not this time. Let's go into seeing what is going on. Most likely what's happening is the message history is not quite the structure it's expecting. Let's see what's going on. See what's out here. So this is history, and then this is history is then rendered inside of this bad boy.
Would that work if you provide a default array?
It should be an array. Maybe it's. Oh, you know what? Actually, I think I know what's going on. Well, I don't know for sure, but I have a suspicion. Content is now an array. They changed this up a little bit because content can be like images and strings side by side. So it's slightly new syntax, and I always forget about this myself actually. And this is why it's good to have types. Let's just tweak this by checking it first. Let me go inside of here and put a debugger here. This is a client-side debugger. Just to see what else comes back out from the client. Great. Now we have result of the history. Yeah, we have this user and we have content, and content can also be an array like that. Yeah, great reminder. So why don't I even show you another way I take the debug if I'm feeling lazy. Result of messages. JSON string results dot update message history. I think this is probably the problem. Great. Great. But the messages can be in two different formats. Can you handle both? Here is.
I always love how confident AIs are when they start. They're just like, certainly, absolutely, all over it.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you have your own prompts, not to be so, what's the word?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Della knows my stance on
Yeah. Oleg has a great personality for his model. Okay, great. So we have this over here. You know what? I don't really care about typing too much here now. So I'm going to say that should be good. I think that should give us what we want. Cool. And then we say, okay, awesome. What about fire? If the history works correctly, it should give you results of all the fire types, not just, yeah, here it is. Because what about the fire type is not a query. It doesn't know, what do you want? What about the fire type? But with the history, contextually, it would say, oh, you asked me about all the ground type. Now you asked me all the fire type. And you have all my history right there. You can see right there, no problem. So that's a quick 15-minute example of how you can implement some basic message history into your application. You can improve this much more too. If you're like, you know what, I don't like not seeing any information here, you can just put it directly inside of here. And I'd say UI, you probably want to see what you wrote to before, not have like a history box like this. But you know, this is all the world's your oyster, whatever makes sense to you.
Or formatted after, so it's processed to the style you like and stuff. They're all just tools.
Yeah, I just played with it. I've added a couple of things like to the card, like how to pronounce a gender and fun fact.
Yeah.
And I think it's not even pulling it from the database itself. It's just like surprisingly AI trained well enough to know most of the stuff even without the database.
Incredibly good point. You're kind of relying on the fact that these models have been trained heavily already on the internet. And what is on the internet if not Pokemon?
Pokemon is pretty much like 50% of the reason internet exists is Pokemon.
Exactly. So there's a lot of built-in knowledge for these questions as well too. But the thing is, you don't want to rely on that entirely. It's good to have grounding with like real data. The combination though of a model that has good built-in knowledge plus the grounding will reduce hallucinations significantly.
If you can see it, it's blurring the things.
There it is.
I have the kid. Damn it, my face.
Love
Here.
it.
There you
The
go.
book, and I'm just like okay,
The
well, you
essentials.
got it.
Yeah.
I have like a
Yes.
giant thick book of like got it from my kid, and I'm cross-referencing the data. It's like let's see if he got it right.
Oh, that's so funny.
So
All right,
hopefully
we
that was
got 10 minutes left.
Yeah. Any other questions? Any other thoughts and feelings? I try to show up an example of how we can do, memory, but there's tons of things you can do here. Again, the agent stuff is increasingly popular. You can do stuff to introduce and include like more images. Let's see. I missed a bunch of messages. Let's see what's going on.
The other thing, just as a quick pitch for this, will be a series of Learnathons. We'll be doing more. And the next one, it's not finalized yet, but we're probably going to be focusing on adding in controls. So we'll probably be trying to introduce one of our products, Airbender, to come in and actually introduce controls so you can actually have some form of sanity checks and stuff.
Yeah, I think overall, once you start actually building these tools, you'll notice that the things that you need for maintaining them are different than other tools. Not entirely, there's a lot of overlap. But like we have all these tools, for example, for like tracking users, for example, like user stories and understanding how to navigate your application. But now we need more tools to track kind of the interactions that users have with not another human being, but this LLM, and being able to modify how those LLMs work and being able to like very easily without having like code intervention every single time, changing the model. You still have to go in there with changing the string. Imagine if you change that every single time. Your manager is like, oh, I don't actually want to use, I want to use the newest version of Claude now or the oldest version of Claude. You have to go in and make a total catch for that one string, pain in the butt, when it could just be done with some management externally. And I think that's kind of what we're kind of experiencing right now in the development sphere is like, how do we reduce the overall pain and friction? I mean, Vercel AI SDK is already a big part of that. Increasingly, we have these opportunities to build tools, and tooling is being built around this to make it so that the friction and pain between you and building is reduced. So yeah, we'll show you some of our tools. We'll add more to this code base to kind of give you a better, more kind of enterprisey example of what you might see. Of course, it's not really an enterprise app. You wouldn't have a direct query to a database like this in a real application, but we'll just keep building and make it more and more realistic. And yeah, Steph asked some great questions, using something like, ZooStand or Redux or React Context or any of these other tools out there for state management can align very nicely with state management for message and history. This is something that I think they kind of try to do with React AI SDK, especially the RSC stuff, the React server-side stuff. Worth exploring, worth making your own, implementations. It's all very, very new. So in fact, if you can explore and create the right tools that make sense for you, which are much easier to do, as you can write tools from scratch very easily, as you can see, you might have an opportunity to share with the community and start to have your own opinions. And I think that's a great time to start to make those opinions and share them with those around you, because we're all eagerly looking to understand what best practices are in a world where there aren't any. Okay, we have like 7 minutes. If we don't have any questions, that's all well and good. I can kind of riff some more. Let's see. Any examples of this use? Okay. So I would say the closest thing to an example that you see of this kind of product in production is going to be, and I've seen a couple of these examples build up now, essentially querying unstructured data. There is a really good one I just saw. Let me see if I can find it. One second. Find this. I think I watched a YouTube video about this. This might be my history, like yesterday. YouTube history. No, I'll just Google it. It was like the EU using Claude. That's what I saw. Yeah, this is a good example. So European Parliament expands access to their archives with Claude. So they have a Claude archive bot. Essentially, it allows you, and you can just use this if you want. If you want to query, let's just click here. If you want to query like literally millions of documents that they've had in the historic archives right now, it'd be really painful. But they combine like, I think, vectorized database queries with like Claude on top to kind of like navigate and look at that data to get you good summaries, good insights, good references to everything that you want. This is the dashboard. Let's see if I can actually. I haven't tried it out yet. Let's see if I can.
What is this then?
It's all the information. Documents. Wait, search. I don't know how to use this. I should probably look at the actual examples to give you here. They have like a video here. Talk about how great it is. They talk about how great it is. Talk about all the documents they have. It's too many. They talk about like multilinguality, so being able to query in any language and get data back in any language. I don't know if they actually even show you it being used. But just talk about how great it is. I don't think they show it to you, which would be useful, of course, but nothing's that easy. But I think this is probably one of the better examples that available for something like this. If you have like this huge data source of information that you need to like navigate and like search through, that is just like impossible to do so. You can, use a tool like this to search, query, pull insights for, and provide to users, and eventually add more complex layers on top of that, where you structure the output, create like events, create actions, create like automation around this, to kind of just like, pull things out or even like research for you on your behalf. So that's, I think, kind of my thinking for how these tools can be very valuable, especially when you have huge data sets, especially when those data sets are not exactly structured in the way we want them to be. This is how it's done. Let's see. The video.
Welcome to the archives unit.
I think this is probably a tutorial. It's too long. 6 minutes. I didn't have that kind of time. Searching. Advanced content search. I think this is right here. Let's see if I can make it work. Well, they said this. Ask the archives. Do you tools go to this link? I should read the instructions first. Select dashboard, content analysis, top right, ask the EP archives preview. Great. Sequence analysis. Ask. Loading. Cool. What would I ask about the EU Parliament?
Are there any mentions of Pokemons in the documents?
Are there any legal mentions of Pokemon in these documents? Shot in the dark, I would be incredibly surprised. Yeah, but who knows? There's literally millions of documents inside of here. Yeah, it's doing processing of requests. It's gonna, I don't know what will return you, but the nature of the beast is that you want to turn something that's very natural language. And yeah, it even converts it to different languages. So it's like, great, he says, ask in English, but let me search in French and German and Spanish, whatever it may be. Let me, yeah, great. Yeah, sorry. Unfortunately, nothing is that anything to do with Pokemon. What about this? Anything on the referendums of farming usage of new herbicides for all of EU?
Oh, you'll get results there. I can think of some off the top of my head.
But yeah, but probably this is probably a more realistic thing you might want to do, where it's like I need to look up something historically like this. I don't want to like querying this is gonna be hard, especially in all different languages and all different like syntaxes and contexts. Give me something back. We'll see if it's gonna give us anything good. Probably. Maybe I'll need a little answer too, a summary answer. We got a summary answer that said, sorry, there's nothing in here about Pokemon, which completely sensible. Let's see if there's anything in there about herbicides and referendums. You know what? I don't even know what a referendum is. I feel like it's like a vote. Yes, there we go. EU-wide referendums.
It's when you make a referendum on a law. So it's like there's a law, but there was a specific thing that we haven't considered or done, so you're making a referendum on it.
Yeah, it's like I don't think we've had that, but we do have other things. There are mentions of the proposed EU-wide regulations of quality control marketing herbicides, documents 3 and 5. Documents 1 notes that and it actually goes through and tells me like not exactly what you're asking for, but here are the closest things that are interesting and relevant in the summaries. Concerns and debates around specific herbicides like T4, 5T, including the bans in some member states. And you see different languages they support for each of those things. So much more realistic and useful kind of use case than looking for Pokemon stuff. We're at time. It's 2:00. I hope that was a good final example. I think it was probably the most. It's a great question because literally this I think blog post came out yesterday or 2 days ago. Let's see when this happened. Case study. I don't know any dates on these things. They never have any dates on them. Regardless, this is very recent. So yeah, that's my great example of like the kind of apps we can build in the future with this kind of tool. I think we're at time. So we do have I think 2 more thoughts here. Just thank you. No problem. I think I know who that Dan is. If it's the same Dan if I know. Hi Dan, if it's the same one. Yeah, cool. I don't know. I think we close this off. How do we want to close this off, Tom?
Well, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for attending. As far as the recording, yes, we will be sharing the recording with everybody that has attended. We will also be sending out a feedback form so we can cater these experiences to what people need and what people like and all of those good things. And feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn for chats or follow-ups or anything. Yeah, we're here to support, and we really hope you enjoyed it and got some benefit out of it. And thank you so much for taking your time to spend a couple hours learning some stuff with us.
Yes, thank you everyone for coming out. I really appreciate it. It was a blast walking through the stuff. And yeah, hope you all learned at least a little bit something.
Ciao, team.